This one is a Cornish tune and it's called Be Gone From My Window. Okay, we're going to play an original one now, which is also from our album Music for the Devil, and this one is called Blasting Thorn.
Conjure forth the hounds of hell, go forth and hold you his name. The hunt began with winding home, stalk a close and revenue. The baby said by blasting thorn, each tried to put her heart in fear. Her
That was an amazing performance by Mother and beautiful. We have a combination from our Cornish sisters um, of um, a witchcraft. If no one is unfamiliar with The Witch is Real, it was a sort of song and lyrics that was made up, well, that was extended by Margaret Murray from the accounts of the North Berwick witch trials, which Agnes Sampson and her cronies were said to dance with the devil to the creel of "Come a go ye before, come a go ye, if you know not go before, come a let me," and then extended by Margaret Murray in this beautiful song known as "The Witch is Real." And then we have a traditional Cornish song, and then a contemporary witchy song, and it is beautiful. Of all three songs, it brought a smile to my face towards the end when I saw I think is it Inky coming to Gemma, because all this, the reason why I have to keep turning my camera off, because I myself am of a daddy to a dog, so I have to entertain her between performances. So it brought a smile to my face, because constantly Neve, my dog, has been like nudging, and I've had to give her treats ever so often just to sort of entertain her, because she's used to me just playing with her and acting all sorts of nonsense with her. So yes, thank you so much for that performance and supporting this cause. I know you're here today. There's been amazing performers tonight, and I am so blessed, and just that so many people could take a part of this, because Isobel has been someone that has been a large part of my life, both in my practice and in Scottish culture, in Scottish subculture of film, song, literature, of just Scottish witchcraft. And you know, like Old Corpse Road, she is the queen of Scottish witches, and she'll always be. And that is my intention for this documentary, is bringing light to her. Like I mentioned, there's free documentaries out there on the Pendle Witches, but yeah, there's not anything on Isobel Gowdie, and yet her accounts and her confessions were so vivid in local folklore, in folk magic, witchcraft, you know, fairy lore, fairy faith, all boiled into one. And I feel like through this project, I want to give her the justice that she didn't have in life. But although it is traditional, you would throw roses and flowers to the performers, and I can't do that since it's Zoom, but I offer a red rose to all the performers here that has partake in this cause, this event, and that rose goes out to you, all of you that have performed tonight. You have done fantastic work, and I really appreciate all the efforts you've gone into doing this. And definitely Isobel is proud. And also, although I can't present them now because I'm still yet to make them, I have made wee presents to the performers as a wee thank you for taking part and supporting the cause, and mostly, you know, supporting Isobel Gowdie. So since we have a wee bit of time, because Helen couldn't make it, sadly. However, you will see her very soon. I hope to have her a part of the documentary, which I am filming during late September, August, September. And I'm traveling up to Alden. She is a native, not native, but she's lived in Alden for over 16 years. She's a local artist and a poet, and she's absolutely brilliant. So you will be seeing her soon. But she does regretfully say and sends her love for this cause and fully supports it. So yes, and since we have time for the slot, I believe Nancy Kilgrew, who is the author of Bitter Magic, which is a novel all about Isobel's life. I'm yet to read it all. I'm really apologize. I'm so busy with so many projects. At times I overwhelm myself. So I will get round to reading it. I think I read the first chapter and I was just overwhelmed by how much research you went into doing this, and it really gives life to her story, quite literally. So I will now unmute you, Nancy. Are you, let me see. Yep, right. No. Again, sorry about this. Technology. Right. Come on, we.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I wish I could see everybody else. Well, thank you so much.
I've had to mute people because I didn't want to interfere with like people's performances and stuff. But yes, I am an honor to have you on here. Again, I'm yet to read all of your novel. I apologize. Like I said, like I make so many projects for myself. I overwhelm myself sometimes. But I
understand dyslexia.
Yes, and dyslexia as well. So with me, I have to read things 3 times to get. Again, I feel like when I read a book, by the 3rd time, I get it. Like there's something I've missed from the 1st time or 2nd time. So yeah, it's a bit of a struggle at times, but I won't let it beat me. But yes, you said you want to do sort of some questions or your own thoughts on Isobel, because I know you before writing the book, you spent some time in Alden yourself and went to the places that she once trod.
Yeah, it was great. Well, actually, I had written the 2nd draft of the book when I went to Nairn in Scotland and Murray. Yeah, and the way I discovered Isobel was through an ancestor search. Typical American coming to Scotland, and I had discovered that I had all these Covenanters in my as my ancestors, and started studying them, and I realized, I discovered that where they were the most populous was also where there were the most witch trials. And I thought, wow, that's that's a coincidence. So when I discovered Isobel, right, in one of their communities, I just, like you, I tried very hard to understand that that worldview, and not only the magic that she that she practiced, which wasn't just all healing. There was a whole magical system which included a lot of different dimensions. So it was really challenged to get into that. And then also I was trying very hard to understand the Christian people in that community, that they were all interacting. So my novel is really looking, into both sides as very human. And it's not just your typical, good witch, bad Christian story. It's a little bit more than that. But it was great to discover you and your Facebook page and your book, Ash.
And it was so because we've we've chatted quite a bit, and like I remember you saying about the trials and tribulations of trying to find the Dooney Hills,
Right.
which is like apparently I remember what you're saying is like overcovered like by brambles and whatnot, and it's
Bracken.
hard
Yeah.
to find because I think you had to speak to locals to even find it.
I did. And you say Dooney.
Yeah,
I've always pronounced it Downey, but
yeah.
anyway, yes, it was really an adventure to find that the Dooney Hill was Isobel's fairy mound, as probably a lot of you know. So I thought this is her sacred spot. This is where she, experienced the fairies. And I found it on the Ordnance Survey map, but nobody in that area knew where it was or knew about it, which was very interesting.
Why? Because I looked at, after speaking to you, I looked at it myself, and it's like called the Dooney Hilloch now.
That's what they call it.
Yeah, Hilloch, which is basically the same thing as a hill, which I'll have to pick your brains at, because when I go up there, that's one of the locations I wish to sort of film. So if you had trouble finding it, I would need some help on that sort of part.
Oh, sure. Well, I was driving back and forth, in that area, and suddenly one time the sun was shining just right, and through this big copse of trees, you could see this enormous mound. And so I went to the farm across the street and asked this young man, is that the Downey Hill? And he said, oh, that's an old Dunfort from the Iron Age.
And
then I realized that these fairy mounds were mostly old Iron Age Dunforts, that some of them had been excavated and some not.
And that's the thing as well. It seems within the 17th century, a lot of fairy hills are associated with old forts or old burial mounds. And it kind of, to me, I feel like it's somewhere in people's folk memory that there's that connection that, oh, it's a whole old hill fort or an old burial mound. It's something the fairies.
Some kind of activity going on there. Yeah.
And when I look at like mythology in the Irish sagas, a lot of you hear of like the Tuatha De Danann. There's a story where they're exiled to a mound, a fairy mound, and you can't help but think, is this like a folk memory that is passed on through oral tradition of having this association with burial mounds and ancient forts as being associated with the fairies?
That's an intriguing question. Yeah.
Why? And I think, I think today our memories are not as great as in the past, because we rely on so much on technology, and I really think when it came to literature, like I think it replaced our memory, and I think me as like an ethnologist and a practicing historian, I think we really like underestimate people's like memory back then. Like, things like that were told and passed on was important to the community, like stories of, you hear stories about the Fia McCool and, the great Gales and the giants and the fairies. And I think within these communities, especially within the Healands, like these were like really important things within the community, like that they told their children and their children's children.
Right, and that's how they were educated, was through oral storytelling and passing down the, and I think the whole, the folk magic and that whole system of belief, was passed down. And one book that I really loved, some of you might be interested in, was Emma Wilby's book on Isobel Gowdie.
I have it right here. A big tomb of a book.
she compared Isabel's belief system to folk traditions throughout the world and found parallels and similarities with cultures in Africa or in South America. You know, the different names of the different groups who practice that magic and believed in the same kind of out-of-body experiences, and so it was really fascinating.
It's interesting because I love part of the historian in me, or the folklorist, is making comparisons from one culture to another. And it's amazing how, when I look at like content from within the British Isles or my home here in Scotland, that you see parallels within like Scandinavia and even far off eastern traditions of Thailand and whatnot. And that animism, you know, that thought that the world around us is alive, everything is alive, it has spirit, it has a personality, a name. That seems to be the common thread within like cultures, that, you know, there's a relationship between people and the land. And it's quite sad now, because I feel like in our modern day we don't really have that, because we don't farm, or we don't have our own chickens no more. And
we're not barefoot on the earth every day.
Yeah, so we don't witness these experiences that our ancestors did back in the past. So I feel like sometimes we're a little bit sort of apart. Like, although we're you know, we're part of nature, we come from the earth itself. I feel like today's society, like I always like, it always makes me laugh that, like, you know, today, I mean, when I was brought up, I learned trees and stuff from my dad, and he used to like take us on walks, and we used to take the dog, and he used to teach me the trees, like that's her name's Willow and his name's Oak. And you know, little things like, you know, if you get stung by a nettle, then a dock will cure it, and what was edible, what was not. And it's really like baffling that when I speak to folks now, like they don't know what a dock leaf is, or they don't know what a nettle is, and they don't know what's edible and what's not, which is really dangerous, really, because when you have kids or you have like animals, like for example, hemlock grows wildly everywhere amongst the river banks, and I think one of my friends here tonight, like she had a very dangerous experience of just inhaling the pollen from hemlock, and she had to go to hospital. The respiratory, it basically attacks your respiratory systems. But it baffles me, because I'm like, things that I was taught by my dad is like that young mothers and fathers today just are not making aware of their children, because they could be playing there's a lot of dangerous plants out there. And
you know, well, I think most of us are not like you. Most of us didn't get that kind of gift from our parents that you did, I think. So I'm one.
Maybe,
I don't
like, maybe I'm doing a reflection of my own upbringing. That's probably my downfall. But because I come, well, my dad's side's from Aberdeenshire, and my mum's side's from like Ireland in Kilkenny, and we were quite like a working class family. And I suppose to my grandparents knowing this knowledge, because, you know, if you're poor, then you'll forage for food. So you need to know what's edible and what's not. So maybe I'm like, yeah, maybe you're right. I'm doing a reflection of my own experiences and having expectations on others that they think they should have. But
Ash, I would love to hear some comments from other people. Are you?
Yes, of course.
Can we open it up?
Yes, and thank you so much for being on. And again,
thank you.
If anyone else hasn't already read it, she's an author of Bitter Magic, which is a novel all based on Isobel Gowdie's life, and Janet as well. and it is fantastic. As much as I only read the first chapter, I'm really sorry, and it's not because I was disinterested. Like I said, I make so many projects on myself, I overwhelm myself. So I will like resistant and like, right, put away the history books and let's go into the land of fantasy, because sometimes I think you need that. So, but yes, thank you so much, Nancy, for being on and having your thoughts. And yes, everyone read her book. It's amazing. Right. Thank you very much. One sec. Let me just. Okay.
Okay, I was just gonna, I muted myself because my dog was barking. Oh,
No, it's
there
fine.
she goes again. Anyway,
Mine's
I thought Lou had some interesting things to say because she had written a piece. I'll mute myself now.
All right, okay. Like, one sec. Right, Rick and Lou, if you're comfortable. Hello, right. I didn't know if you were comfortable to speak.
Yeah, hang on, there's the video on. I don't know if you can see us.
Not yet.
I'm in the dark.
Let me see. Right. No, not yet.
Sorry, no. How do I do that? No, yes. No, there is a, oh, hang on, because my boyfriend's put, there you go. Can you see anything? Hello.
Right, one sec. Why can't I see it on my side? See, again, technology, I'm not very good at all. I can see you now. Right, okay. I just realized I had to like kind of scroll down. Hi. Thank you for coming on. I believe you have like some kind of information and thoughts on Isobel.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know much about your background. I was quite curious. I was going to ask you if you were part of an organization in particular, if you're Pagan Federation, or if you're just a free electron, or.
Well, as spiritual, I don't really label myself as anything. I kind of, I'm no mean eclectic at all, but if people ask me, then I'm an animist and a folk magic practitioner. But mostly I'm known through, I'm a student at the University in Edinburgh studying like Scottish history and ethnology. And if people don't know, familiar with the word ethnology, it's the study of an ethnic group of like, so it's looking into like their belief systems, their stories, their language, and recording that and analyzing it and picking at it. Like, so I always think like ethnologists or ethnologists are like magpies because they love to pick at things. But if anyone knows, I am the author of yes, the Black Book of Isobel Gowdie and other Scottish spells and charms.
And that's my baby.
Oh, right. Yes, I call mine my babies. And I believe like in my second book, which is Visions of the Spey Wife, it's all about divination and fortune telling in Scotland. I explain, because my first book was quite a journey, and I explain why I call it my baby, because when you start writing, it becomes like a creature in its own. Like, and you never, when you plan something, it sort of transforms in its own self, if you know what I mean. And I'm like, you birth it. So I go on to like saying how, you know, the title is its name, and its cover is its skin, and you know, its contents is its personality. But absolutely. Yeah, like, tell me more about your book.
So basically, like, I'm an eclectic pagan, but I do ritual magic as well. I'm a Babylon devotee as well. I was in OTO for a while. I mainly do like kind of, high magic and eclectic paganism. But like I was saying to you when I was writing to you this week, when I was 18, I was at university in France. and I found Walter Scott, a history of demonology and witchcraft. And I found the story of Isobel Gowdie, and I'm sure, like loads of you here tonight, I fell in love. And I had to order the book from the library at my university, and it was just the beginning of the internet. So you had to get the book from like the 6th floor underground, and I had to wait for 3 days to get it. And then the woman came up with this thing, and he had like a demon on the cover. It was really old edition. And I just fell in love with that story, and I became obsessed with it. And the song I sent you, the first version was written then. Then it was recorded first time in 2010. It was an acoustic version. And it was a very strange night because it was a May night. It would have been around the time when she, you know, she would have been imprisoned. And we were in this studio, and the moon was shining through the branches of the hawthorn trees.
Which is weird because I started writing my book in May as well. It was so weird.
You know, and I was thinking I had a candle up because like whenever we recorded with the band, I always had an altar. And I don't know if the musician here will have similar experiences, but sometimes if you record a magical album, things will happen. So, you know, things wouldn't record, or there'd be weird feedbacks, and we're like, where does this come from? And it was one of such happenings. And so through the years, like Isobel's been my constant companion, whether through music or short stories, or I'm part of the Dolmen Grove as well. And I've been doing talks at their camps for the past 7 years about that. And I did one at Isobel Gowdie when Emma Wilby's book came out. Because I really wanted to do my master's study on Isobel Gowdie. And at the time, my teacher said to me, look, this woman from Exeter University is on the case. And he said, I don't think you can do it anyway. Why? Because I'm French, You've got to read documents in 17th century Scottish. And it's like,
also,
you know?
like in the world of like academia, it's like, you have to be careful on stepping on people's toes and stuff when they're doing their own thesis. And you're like, oh, I can't do that now.
And also it was that time, I think, late 90s, when like coming to academia, especially when you're talking about witchcraft, when you are yourself a practitioner, it was a bit, I mean, Ronald Hutton himself, you know, he got into all kind of trouble at one stage of his career because people didn't like somebody who was a pagan to talk about paganism. They never seem to mind if a Christian talks about Christianity, but somehow, you know, us talking about our faith from a historical or anthropological perspective makes us biased. I mean, it's less and less like that.
Yes, I completely relate to it because I feel like when I'm at uni, I have to put on 2 hats. So it's like the hat of the historian and the hat as the practitioner. And I feel like when it comes in academia, like, especially in uni, like, it doesn't gel well. So unless I'm comfortable with like the lecturer or the tutor, I don't really say that I'm a practitioner. Because like instantly you're then discredited. Like they have an opinion about you and that they think that you're gonna go down some kind of rabbit hole that you know that goes against their theories. But yeah, like I have my own theories when it comes to the witch trials, and at the moment, like when it comes to the study of the witch trials, it's moved through several schools of thought. Like it was just purely historian, now it's social sciences, but like I'm saying we need to look at witch trials in a psychological way, because I think human behavior doesn't really change. So when we look at witch trials, it's massively about fear. It's about fear of the demonic. It's a fear of women becoming uncontrollable, you know, and it's massively about fear. And I think when it comes to human behavior, it doesn't really change. So when you're scared of something, you act erratically, and you may act in ways that probably like is out of your character. And then when you do these acts, I'm pretty sure that these people were condemning witches did have some kind of guilt or sympathy afterwards, because when you have fear about something and then you're set aside and you rationalize in your mind, you're like, fuck, what the fuck did I do there? Like, what the fuck, you know? So I always say to my tutors that I think we need to start looking at witch trials in a kind of psychological lens, not just like social sciences.
So, you know, to go back to what we were saying at the beginning about particularly about Isobel and the psychology of why she kept a maiden name.
Yes.
Now, I was wondering what happened to John, you know, the cutter, because we know Janet Braidhead. I don't know how you pronounce it in
Breedhead.
How do you say it?
Breedhead.
Breedhead.
Yeah, Breedhead. Yeah.
I mean, there's her confession, and you can read what she's written, and it's very kind of, her confession is very bog standard.
Yeah.
You know, in the sense that it's following
a bit as well.
like, the expected route of like, this is what I've done with the devil. When Isobel's confession, it goes on all directions. It's sexy, there's fairies, and it's quite different.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at, I made a table somewhere, I've got it on my iPad, of what Janet says in her confession, who was in the coven according to Janet, and what their aims were, where they were living. And I did one for Isobel comparing, and so Janet's husband was arrested, but where the heck is Isobel's husband?
Yes.
What happened to...
This is what I'm sort of trying to pick at, because Janet, like she doesn't use a maiden name, the same as her husband's. But yeah, in Isobel's case, like she's clearly using her maiden name, whereas like her husband is John Gilbert. So like I think, like when I was going back to what I was talking to Gillian about, you know, maybe it is a case where she is in a kind of abusive relationship, or you know, because women are like property back then, which is fucked up. But and you know, the whole of dowries and stuff like that. And is it the case of she's trying to protect her husband, or is it the case of she's trying to distance herself from her husband?
The fact that she says she puts the broom in her husband's bed when she's going frolicking with the
devil. Like
she makes a point of saying several times, laying with the devil was way better than with everybody else's husbands. Yeah, so that's a bit of a take that, John. You know.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, she is. Like she's like, by the actor saying like he was better than any kind of like man's husband. It is a dig at John.
Yeah.
Like, because he should be, as a husband in her society, he should be able to satisfy her financially, sexually, and obviously the main thing, kids, you know, bringing childbearing. So it is like kind of a satire, like to John, saying that the devil was better than her own husband. And
well, that's it.
And it's weird that you say that, because I've looked into accounts, and there was this one, I mean, it's several hundred years later, but there's a book of Scottish folk tales, and it's the witches of, oh my God, right, I'll have to research and put it in the comment, but it's the witches of Dinello or anything. But they say that in the folk legend, the folk tale, they are doing the same thing. They're putting like brooms next to their husbands and enchanting it to be like to seem it's like their wives, so they can sneak off at night.
So I don't know if you, I mean, obviously we've got the Bits of Magic book that seems really exciting from Nancy. But there's like the book, there's The Devil's Mistress, and I forgot who is it by now. I'm sure you've got it. Oh, the devil! I've got it next door, but I've got to dig it out.
Yes, I know what you mean. It's a Scottish. Yes, I've been trying to get it.
Who wrote this? It would come back to me. But in the book, she's unhappily married to John, who like rapes her, and she meets the devil in the church, and he's a dark man, etc. But in the book, it kind of ends up on its head, because she regrets in the end, you know, what she's been doing, and she accepts being burned as an act of redemption. And you can look at her in some ways. But in the story I wrote, I kind of almost saw her as almost like a Christic figure. She sacrifices herself. And in my story, I kind of saw it as You know what we have from Isobel nowadays is the songs, yeah. The songs have carried through time. Dave the Bard sings Fifth Ave song, you know, it's the same song. And so we still use this song, covens all around the world use that song. So her songs are what remains. And in a way, those songs were instrumental into influencing Margaret Murray, influencing the first covens. And so in a way, she is like the grandmother of Wicca. You know, she put the word coven in. She's the first person to use the idea of a coven of 13 people. So a lot of our terminology comes from her. So I kind of saw her as somebody who had to die so a memory would live on and the songs would live on. Because if she hadn't died, we wouldn't know the songs.
Oh,
we wouldn't have proof of that.
And you made it a fantastic point about that. So the word coven, which probably comes from like covenant.
Yeah.
Because it's quite apparent because, you know, she says her familiar is ex-Reaver.
That's it.
And Reavers were the rebellions within, you know, the Highlands, the Borderlands, you know, they were the bad boys gang of.
So Reavers, like in the 17th century Scottish, it would have been referring to what exactly?
So they were like a gang of outlaws. That a lot of them were Catholic, which at the time, you know, being a Presbyterian country of Scotland, would have been alone, you know, don't mess with them sort of thing. But they were like just a sort of a large gang of rebellions that went and raided and kind of conned people and created little civil wars as well. So it's interesting that her familiar is ex-Reaver.
You call it ex-Reaver? Because I had him as a Red Reaver.
No, oh yeah, Red Reaver. Sorry, yeah. So I'm thinking of Gillian's band, ex-Reaver.
Ah, that's
so
it.
It is Red Reaver, and they are the rebellious sort of gangs that are happening in the Highlands, all around Scotland. So it's interesting that that's her familiar, and then she comes up with the word coven, which obviously comes from like convent, like to convent or conventers, or you know, it comes from that word. But it's like what you said, you know, when I think Gerald Gardner, as much as taken heavily influences of like Freemasonry, he's looking into Scottish witch trials and he's like, well, what's this word coven? And there's 13 witches.
And there's an officer and a maiden.
Yeah, officer and a maiden, high priestess, high priest, you know. So I think, and even when like I had this wee experiment where we were in my old coven, we always sort of doing a visionary experience. And afterwards, we always discussed like what we've experienced. And a lot of people within my coven at the time were they saw themselves turn into hares or crows or, you know, or cats. And I'm like, and then you look at what, you know, Gardnerian tradition is and how to visionary, like, there's definitely, and I think we don't realize this as practitioners, that there is a massive influence from Isobel Gowdie in our practices. You know, as ideals of covens and 13 witches, who was convicted 13, the word coven, the act of, you know, what we call now skin turning, you know, what's popular, a hare, a cat, a crow. And I think we do this from, you know, the Gardnerian and Alexandrian, like, you know, and we don't realize that we're doing it, but it's through their influences of the accounts of Isobel Gowdie that we do that today, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'd like to see people's hypothesis about what happened, because there's a record of the what they call the elders of Alden writing to the king saying, right, we're going to execute these two women, but we don't know if it was Isobel and Janet or what. Yeah. And apparently the order was passed, that was it. But we don't know for sure if it was them or if it happened.
Yes.
So what's your take? What do you think? I kind of say she burned, yeah.
So I've got so many theories. Like, I have people coming to me and saying that she doesn't exist.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, like I have quite a few people that's come to me and like they feel like she doesn't exist and it's like propaganda from the Presbyterian Church and stuff like that. But I always say, well, if so, like, I don't think they would go for the lengths of recording, of having witnesses, of having several people involved in that case to fortify a person that doesn't exist. So that to me is out the window. She does exist. And then I you know, there's always that question mark, like, because we don't know of a fate, it's not being recorded, which is weird because, well, it's not weird. There's a few trial records where it's unknown. It's probably because of lack of documentation at the time, or, you know, blurs or discrepancies, or, you know, all sorts of things. But mostly, like, you know, their fate is recorded of executed or acquitted.
Yeah.
You know, and Isobel and the rest of her cronies, like, it's just unknown. And I've been talking to like locals in Aldern, and although I haven't spoke to the local historian yet, but I've been told through Helen, who's a local artist there.
I can't wait to see the art. I mean, you should post some photos or give us a link.
I will. Like, so if you're on Scottish Cunning Ways group, I'll post it on there or on my shop, Scottish Cunning Ways shop. But also you can just like Google it. So if you put Helen, right, I'll write it now.
Yeah, write it down.
Because
I'll put it down as well.
My accent is very weird. So I come from like Birmingham.
Okay.
I come from Birmingham, and then I've lived in London, and I've lived in Scotland for a while. So my accent, what I call is a bastard accent.
So is mine, don't worry. I live in Southwest England.
So Helen White, she's lived in Aldern for over 16 years. She did a mural on her garden wall of just, you know, depicting her story. She does a little bit about the War of Aldern as well in 1645, which, you know, it's speculated if Isobel was in her late 20s, 30s, she would have witnessed that war. So she does a little bit of that, but mostly it's about Isobel's life. So if you type that into Google, you'll see like an article.
Is that Ellen or H-E-L?
One L.
So H-E-L-E-N?
Yeah,
or
yeah. I've just put it in the search thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Not the search thing, the chat. So if you type it in, there's an article from Nen Press or something like that.
Okay.
There's a few pictures there, but she sent me some pictures personally, and if you go on to Aldine Memories on Facebook, it's a group there. So a woman kindly, when she was walking a dog, took some pictures for me and put it up on the group. But it's fantastic. Like, there's like pictures of her in the the court. There's pictures of her with the devil, pictures of her healing people. I really just feel like, you know, she should be recognized a little bit more, because the mural is beautiful. And speaking to her, like, you know, there's a few signage and stuff, but she just herself feels like, you know, there's not really much spoken about her, and yet, you know, like, that's the town where she's convicted, like, but yeah.
Yes, I really want to go to Aldern, and the closest I've been is on Google Earth.
Me too.
And you can see the church, and there's like an embankment where the church is, and it's like on a high bit, and you're wondering, okay, why is it on a high as well? Was there a hill that it was built on? And I don't know. I didn't imagine it at all like this at first, you know. But what Nancy was saying about finding the Hollow Hills, I'm fascinated by that, because in my head that was part of the legend. It wasn't a place, you know what I mean? Even though we know it was a place. So that's really fascinating. I'd like to really find where that is, and if Nancy maybe can, you know, put
I
the
believe
coordinates
Nancy
on.
wants to, I'll just unmute her. One sec.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to the Aldern Church too. And it's really interesting. There's a new church built in the 1800s, new, and behind it is the ruins of the old church, which is filled with gravestones. But it's high on a hill, and that's where they built churches back then, you know, where you'd be the most prominent in the land.
Because where I am in southern England, it's not like that at all. I mean, all the churches are on flat ground. The only ones that I know that have been built on a hill have been built on places where there used to be hill forts.
Yeah, and that's very common in Scotland too.
Mm-hmm.
This was considered a sacred spot, you know, pre-Christian, and then the Christians adopted it as well.
I feel
So
like,
what was? Oh, go on, Ash.
so in my research, like, I might be overreaching or a bit biased, but when I look at like Celtic regions like Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Brittany, it seems like there's a common theme where older churches from, especially through like early medieval, is on like hill forts or hills. And again, like what Nancy's saying as well, like it also being the prominent thing, like we are the highest point, you know, of your village. But like I feel like there's a connection there where, again, when Christianity comes in and native beliefs emerge, you know, of hill forts and fairy mounds, I feel like when Christianity loves to adapt things, don't they? Like they love to go to cultures and they're like, right, okay, so they're not going to give this up, so we'll just adapt it in some kind of way and be like, well, Jesus did his sermons on a hill, so there is where we will build our church. But really it is just adapting to indigenous culture before Christianity is hitting to them.
Yeah, and particularly the Catholic Church was able, especially in the Celtic, in Ireland, for instance, was able to merge the folk and the earth-based traditions into the Christian. But the Protestants, when they came along with the Reformation, they wanted to get rid of all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't want to. They thought all the Catholic prayers were just pure superstition, and the people practicing magic, like Isobel, incorporated those Catholic prayers. Like she'd say, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," you know, and then she'd also say, "In the name of the devil," you know. She'd mix it up.
Oh, and it's a good point there, because although it's like a century before her with the Reformation and most of Britain, I mean, Scotland is a little bit later
She was right in the midst of the Scottish Reformation.
Yeah. Scotland's a bit later than England of conforming to Protestantism, but you know, it's in folk memory of her grandparents, you know, of Catholicism, and even older beliefs, like I was talking to you about folk memory. Today we take that advantage because we have like literature really takes over our memory, because we don't need to remember things because we can write it down, we can do texts, we can do this. But back then that wasn't available, so you had to rely on your memory. So I think like people, and especially historians, like they really underestimate the importance of memory back then. Like I think their memory could passed on through families. I mean, okay, yes, we've got to put into account of Chinese whispers. Things change over time, but the main point always stays. And I think back then, when all you have is your memory, you can't read and write. like it stays. And like today, I think the reason why we have like fish memory is because we can just write it down or put it in a text.
It's true. It's true. You can see in the confessions how like the healing spells are very Catholic leaning.
Yes.
And I mean the more dark spells. I mean that, you know, when they have the elf arrows, for instance, and things like that. And that, you can imagine being on that fairy mound and finding arrowheads. So the dark spells would have been associated with the ancestors, the kind of people who lived there before that they didn't really understand.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, it's a shame because the notes of my talk are on my old computer, but I have to dig them out. I went through the whole thing and all the different spells and, you know, the origins that they could potentially have, looking at folk songs of the time and see if there was other things. The thing is that I wrote this 5 years ago, so I remember some of it, but from the top of my head, I'll have to dig it out and send it to you.
I do, like, dig it out, get that old computer out and dig it out, because like I said, like this is
I'd like that too. And maybe could you put something about it in the chat?
I will. I mean, I'd have to go and get the computer out, but I suppose I can, if we have on the Scottish Cunning Folkway. Sorry, I'm French and I'm tired, so
no.
stepping on my word. But if you did a chat, for instance, on Facebook for all people who are here tonight, I could post that there, maybe.
Well, funny enough, you say that. I was gonna finish tonight talking about this Kickstarter, and also I'm gonna do an event, like a page on the documentary, so it allows people to sort of submit information if they know something about it, so that, because I'm hoping to film, well, it's definite, around August, September. So yes.
So it's a historical documentary, or do you want to put some drama in it, or what's your...
It's going to be historical, it's going to have reenactment parts, and it's going to be interviews to locals as well.
You need to get Ronald Hutton on the spot. I'm sure he'll say something.
Oh, I did, like, oh, well, I won't say too much, but like, so Ronald Hutton is like the professor of England when it comes to that sort of thing. But we have our own man here in Scotland called Julian Goodare. So I did reach out to him, but he has other commitments.
You should try with Ronald, honestly. So, I mean, he might have other commitments, but he's always happy to help.
Oh, well, I will.
Well,
I'm hoping
I've got his email.
And what about Emma Wilby? Have you asked her?
Well, that is as well. I'm going to reach out to her as well. But again, I'm trying to, at the moment, establish sort of a groundwork, like a touchstone, and then build on from that, because really I need to I want it to be a communal project. So I want it to, because it's going to be filmed in Alden. My main focus at the moment is talking to locals and, you know, and interviewing them, because I think they're the ones that make the story. And like I was talking about folk memory, I feel like there's a tale in someone, you know, that lives there.
It's funny, I've met people online who were from Alden, and they said, oh, it's a terrible thing. It was a story of evil. She was purely evil. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. So you might have people who like slam doors in your faces, like in horror movies. But you're bound to find people, I don't know if you got contacts already, who have stories that came from their grandparents, and that's going to...
She's known as the Witch of Alden.
Oh, well, you'll like you said, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. There is a lot, and I've had a lot of negative feedback, unfortunately, and saying it's a waste of time, and like you said, it's negative. It was something that was evil, and this is coming from views that are you know, fundamental Christians. So I tend to ignore them and go to people that are a lot more open-minded. So you'll be surprised that there is a few locals that are willing to tell us a tale or two.
There's also a story. There's one man who owns a Lochley estate.
Yes.
And do you know Andrew Coombs? And
No, I haven't reached out to him yet, but I remember for our conversation.
Yeah, so I stayed in his guest house when I was there, but he said the center part of the house, which is built on with wings, but the center part is 17th century. And there was a story that was where Isobel lived with her husband, who was in charge of the farming. But Emma Wilby completely disagreed with that. And she said, no, she was a peasant. She lived in the farm town, which made more sense to me. So that was a story I went with in my book.
Oh, well, again, it's all speculation. You have to be critical. Like my time,
but it might be fun to get some of those different stories, you know, that are
like. And again, it's not about what's. I mean, okay, my focus is about telling her story to the truest I can. But also you got to take and have sensitivities to locals that have a tale or two, whether they are true or false. So you deceive it as true as false. But it like again, that's in my work of ethnology, like that's my thing. Like whether I believe it or not, that's their tale. That's something that's been passed on probably several generations. And again, Chinese whispers, the theory of Chinese whispers, we've got to take that into account. Things change is one tale. I'll tell you a tale, you'll tell it to another one very different. It's just the way our minds work. You know. But I just feel like, again, like this, I just feel like I need to give her the justice that she didn't have in life. And I want to speak to like my intentions are speaking to locals first and then historians last, you know. Like because like
round up for
yeah, like I just, not that I just I don't respect historians. Like I'm learning to be a historian myself, but I feel like sometimes in the world of academia, like once you set yourself on a theory or a thesis, it's hard to get yourself out of that, and broaden yourself, because you've put your thesis on that work. Like
we were dealing with something which is in the realms of not just history and anthropology and psychology, like you say, but Isobel is our imagination as well. Like all the gaps in that story we fill with our desires, our art, what we project of ourselves in her as well.
I was talking to my partner the other night about the reason why I feel like we should look at witch trials through psychology, because a lot of these accounts of witches is probably subjected through our own desires. Like you see a lot of times, like kissing the devil's ass, what we would see is, sorry, my French, rimming, and who's saying these tales? Who's saying this? Men.
Well,
So in a society where even oral sex is a go, no, it's a no, right? So even the back end oral is definitely something diabolical. So when
it's about misogyny,
when
which started with Malleus Maleficarum, and King James, who wrote Demonology, and they escalated the whole misogynist, which
and it is a work of fiction. It is a work, and who wrote that? A man, And so, and you see it in woodcuts all the time, women kissing the devil's ass, as what we call rimming today. Is this a reflection of which are the writers of that day, men? Is this a reflection of their innermost desires, which they can't express because it's deemed as sinful? And this is why I say that I think we need to start looking at witch trials in a psychological direction, because and looking at the context, because as a gay man myself, I'm not going to say any more, but well,
you're right. And Lou mentioned the Brody in his book, The Devil's Mistress, which is I thought was very entertaining. I liked it a lot, except that, he wrote it at the beginning of the 1900s, and it was all about Isobel was a sex object. She was sexy.
Yeah.
And speaking of a man's point of view.
And all the witch trials, and I mean, I have a copy of the Malleus Maleficarum. Who doesn't, if there's, self-professed historian.
Entertaining.
And it is a work of fiction, and it's kind of like a pornographic thing. So like, I was talking to my partner, like, I remember before visual porn, magazines, that got our rocks off, but probably doesn't now today, because now we have, video of pornographic material. But when you look at, like, broad posts of witches, licking devil's ass and doing all sorts of, diabolical acts, who's to say that the men are like, I need to inspect this more further, I have to take this home?
Well, that was also a part of it was a part of the trials and Isabel's questioners. I'm sure they wanted all the details of her having sex with the devil, and that's why she said a lot of that.
I just feel like, again, that's why we need to look at witch trials in the direction of psychology, because I feel like human behavior doesn't change. Sexual desires don't change. Our sexuality has never changed. It's just been suppressed, ignored, and whatnot. Like, there were gays back then. There were people that had fetishes like we have today. And I feel like, and who are the writers of these? Men. So, like, if there's envisioning women kissing the devil's ass, then maybe that's a reflection of his own desires,
I mean, you can really see how
a
lot of what the witches are saying is more or less what's expected of them. And Emma Wilby touches on that when she says, at some stage you don't read the question, but what she says about what happened to her implies a question that wasn't recorded. And those questions are meant to gear her towards giving the expected narrative of, this is what I did with the devil. And in the first confessions, there's some details, but as the confessions go by, they tend to be a lot more.
They wanted more,
and they're clever,
asking and pushing her in that direction as well.
Sorry, I've got my book here. I will note the guy that I put. He did from Scots to English, and then he inserted what would have been the questions.
That's it.
Eddie Murray. In 2005, that's why I included in my book. So he does it from Scots to plain English to understand the viewer, and then he also inserts like what the questions would have been. But they're clever because they're just putting it as if she's just like freely saying all this.
Exactly.
There is people there going, did you meet the devil? What did the devil look like? Did you have sex with the devil? What else did you do with the devil? And then also, she's going on a tangent, and she's like, well, I also know this charm and this charm and this charm, and they're like, but they're just not interested in that bit. They just want to know the devil bit because they need evidence to convict her, like, as a witch. Like, charms and spells, are practiced by many people. They want to know, like, what she's doing with the devil, what pact, and what are they conspiring against their neighbors.
Right. So, and as you say, everybody believed in magic, and everybody believed the devil was real, as Lou pointed out. That was all based on fear. Witch craze.
And it's like today, like, we have terminology today that we didn't have back then. Like, folk magic is a new terminology. What they're doing is they see as prayer or charms. Then they wouldn't say it's folk magic. They wouldn't say info.
And I don't think Isobel ever referred to herself as a witch.
No.
I mean, I don't think she thought of herself as a witch.
No.
I don't
What
think.
would you say she thought herself as, Nancy?
Well, a cunning woman, you know, she had a lot of power, you know, in her community, as most of the women did they were trying to get rid of through the witch trials.
How much bard because of the nature of the you know, the poetic natures of the confessions. Emma will be states that she that she thinks she was a bard of some sort, and I'm really interested in that because you don't see that in other confessions, something that poetic.
You think she was what?
A bard, like she thought she was some kind of poet. No, we need to
play. Oh, right, and that was one thing Emma Wilby brought out too.
That's it, yeah.
She was a storyteller.
Yeah.
You know, so in this community, she had the power of being a storyteller and a healer, and you know, people were afraid of her because she could zap you if you didn't like her. And I also saw her as a social justice advocate, because when you think about it, the people she cursed were the Laird of Hay, who was her boss, you know, oppressed the peasants who were living on his land, and the minister, who was clearly out to get her. And so she was standing up to power and using her power, which was her magic, you know, try to get back at them.
And going through people's keyholes at night to eat all their food and then get off again, that's really the poor stealing from the rich.
Yeah.
It's like
Robin Hood.
I have it as well. I call it Robin Hood syndrome. So
call it what?
Like Robin Hood syndrome, I call it.
Oh.
So like I watch, like my partner watches the news every morning. I sometimes before I met him, I don't like watching the news because it depresses me. But now I'm like, everything I watch about the Conservatives, I'm like, right, what they should do is like find that cunt and, you know, give that money to the people that are suffering. So like I have like Robin Hood syndrome, I call it. So, but yeah, like I really do feel like she is, like you said, using her own power. You know,
and I really saw Isobel that way too.
Be acquitted from this. Like she knows her fate is going to be death, and although it's unknown, I do believe they would have seen her too dangerous to release to the public to be acquitted, because like how vivid, like I mean, if anyone when they were young, you know, telling ghost stories, you know, you were up at night, like you were frightened. So I always try and put myself, sorry, my dog's wanting my attention. I always try and put myself in the mind of their situation in society, and think like that they would have been so frightened by that, you know, like her accounts. And like you said about the bardic arts, like she was definitely a bard. She was definitely a natural storyteller, where it was innate in her or it was passed on to her through her family, which a lot of times it was, to be a storyteller. You know, the whole Cayley culture, you know, it's not just about, and I'm talking about Cayley in the traditional sense of like it's a house party, you know, of musicians and poets and storytellers. You know, it was pretty much like pointing to the corner of, oh, you're quiet, you've got to have a tale or a story or, you know, a song or two. And you know, it didn't matter if you could sing or play an instrument. It was a matter of could you tell something to your community, you know, in this house, this Cayley house. And to her, it probably would have been a tale or two. You know,
I had fun looking at John Gregerson Campbell's book, you know, on the other world, the Gallic other world.
Yes.
And he included a lot of those storytelling. So I picked some of those and put those in Isobel's telling, which was fun.
Why? And it's reading these folk tales, you get a sense of the community, and especially where she is, whether it is a, you know, a Presbyterian community, which is against Gaelic community, but it's still a Gaelic community within the working folk. So, you know, there's people that are bilingual between English and Gaelic, and there's that community of, you know, that culture of storytelling, of Cayley houses, of, you know, entertainment, which a lot of the time would have been the winter months, because that was the only time you were free. You know, the whole summer months, like, you wouldn't see your husband for 6 months, but he's off with the cattle in the summer grazing. You would be at home, you know, attending to weaving, sewing, all the womanly duties. So winter is your rest period, where you know, celebration can happen, stories can told, and new stories, because, you know, I'm sure when your husband's arrived from 6 months ago, he's seen a fairy or two, you know, and he's brought that to the Cayley house, you know. Oh, you know, I was driving my kittle down the road, and I saw the wee man, and he was looking at me, and blah blah blah, you know. And there's another story told, and that's told by someone else and someone else, you know, and it's that rich tradition of like the bardic arts of song and poetry and storytelling. Sorry, I'm just I'm very passionate about Gaelic culture.
No, that's brilliant. It's nice. Oh yeah. Oh, I was going to say, what does it say?
It's Rude is Anna is Guntach, which means what is rare is beautiful.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's an affirmation to myself. I'm the black sheep of the family, you see.
Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. As much I've enjoyed this conversation, and the performers that have been here, I'm going to end it by talking about the Kickstarter project.
Oh, yeah.
I shall go into the head with sorrow and such mickle care. I shall go in the devil's name, and while I come home again.
I'm here in Castle Hill, Edinburgh, in front of the Witches' Well, a monument that marked hundreds of innocent people that were hung and burned during the early modern period. Scotland was the fourth worstest country in Europe for the witch hunts. Over 3,000 people were tried under witchcraft acts during the 17th century. The most famous of all the accounts within Britain was here in Scotland, and her name was Isobel Gowdie. And although it wasn't here that she met her dreadful fate, many people like Isobel would be tried under the witchcraft acts.
It was here in the Scottish Highlands, where in a small village called Aldine, where Isobel Gowdie met her dreadful fate. Isobel handed herself in to the Kirk authorities, which was unusual at the time. Her confessions, obtained without the use of torture, became the most influential and groundbreaking testimonies of the Scottish witch trials, due to their richness in folks, magic, and Scottish belief. Isobel claimed that she could transform herself at will into a hare, a cat, or a black crow. She claimed to have dined with the king and queen of the fairies, and it was even thought to be able to magically transport herself from place to place at will. Isobel worked curses that would lame her landowners, her superiors, and the Kirk ministers, but she mainly dealt in healing charms for the local people in her village.
And it's for this reason that we would like to tell Isobel's story in the truest light as we can, and give her the justice that she did not receive in life. For your pledges and support on this Kickstarter will help go fund a documentary on Isobel Gowdie. We'll go into the Scottish Highlands of Aldine and Nairnshire and tread the places which she once trod. Help us help her tell her story. anyone that's following me on Instagram or Facebook, I will announce the Kickstarter, in which you can view the video of the introduction. There's several tiers that you can sort of support us, including like a donation one. And the highest tier is, which is only limited to 5, is that you get a bottle of whiskey.
Yay!
Of Isobel Gowdie, which I add glows in the dark. It's fabulous, and the artwork is amazing. They're an Edinburgh company that do whiskey, and they do like a folklore series. So it's like the Silky and Nessie and stuff, and then they also do like a Scottish witchcraft series. So they do like Isobel, Agnes Sampson, whatnot, and of course I got Isobel. So yeah, so they're maybe a sponsor to the documentary, but yeah, one of the highest tiers, which is Isobel's Companion, you get all the goodies from the following tier, but you get the bottle of whiskey as well, which is fabulous. Like, the artwork is amazing. Yeah, and like I tested before. I think it's too light in here, even when I turn the lights off. I had to go into the bathroom to see it glow in the dark. But yeah, check out their website. They're called Cask 88. They're an Edinburgh band. Cask. I'll write it in the Cask. Case.
Cask 88.
88. That's it. Yes, yes. And it was actually the Pictish witch that's here today introduced me to the whiskey, which was a very dangerous thing to do, because I was like, I contemplated it for like probably half an hour, and I was like, I'm getting that whiskey. It's a little bit pricey, but I've been drinking a bit of it tonight. It's 14 years matured. It's got a nice, it's quite pleasant. It's smooth. So,
what's your book called again?
It's called The Black Book of Isobel Gowdie and Other Scottish Spells and Charms.
Lovely. Take a note of that. I can't believe I don't have it. That's crazy.
Just send me a message and
cool.
I'll send you a copy.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. It's been really brilliant knowing you and meeting you and all these lovely people. I'm really chuffed that you did this event, and I really hope that the documentary goes fantastically.
I've loved it because, like, now I've met other folks like me that are just like an Isobel fanatic. That's what I call myself. As much as like I'm also a Ouija board fanatic, which I have a large collection on the wall of Ouija board.
Oh,
yeah. But also I'm Isobel fanatic. So it's nice to meet others that are like minds and that are passionate about her story, and just seeing her context. Like, I just feel like, again, I'm repeating myself, but you know, there's so much about the Pendle witches, but there's nothing about Isobel Gowdie as a documentary, and yet there's so many like novels, music, you know, everything about her. And I just feel like she needs the justice that she didn't receive in life.
It's true. At the same time, you don't want her to become commercial. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Because she belongs in the realm of poetry and, you know, of witchcraft.
Oh.
And you don't want it to be Disneyland and all there. Like, it's got to keep magical and hidden.
No, and that's another thing that I find important, is that when I'm doing the documentary, I don't want to disclose the locations, because I've seen I've seen how I used to live in Roslin Chapel, and I've seen how, due to the Da Vinci Code and the filming of Roslin Chapel, like how it's been commercialized now, and like the tourism, which is great. I mean, it's great for the village, but at the same time it's not, because then, you know, with tourism comes a lot of like it's problematic, especially when you're in like a small village, you know. You know, little things as much as like, you know, rubbish control, you know, people throwing their rubbish on everywhere, people going to Roslyn Glen and Roslyn Chapel because of the Da Vinci Code. So I don't want that to happen, and that, although I'll be filming in certain locations, I won't be disclosing where they are.
And if people want to find out, they'll find out. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, they will.
Only the people who can be bothered to find out, and that.
And it's like, for example, Nancy's experience of writing her book. You know, she did a lot of research. She traveled from the States to Auburn, and she couldn't find the Dooney Hills. You know, and I'm, you know, I am, you know, thankful that she's given me that knowledge, and I'm pretty sure she won't be giving it to everyone else. But I also think there's a reason, as a practitioner, taking away my historian hat and putting on my practitioner's hat, I think there's a reason why it can't be found. You know, like, and yeah, I want it to be a documentary that's respectful to her story, to highlight the folklore, to highlight how folk magic was, you know, was important to the community, since like a doctor was expensive and all they did is bleed you like, or put leeches on you, like, and it actually made you worse than better. So you're probably better going to the wise woman that knew about herbs and stuff. And she didn't want payment. Most of the time it's like, well, you know, you own chickens, I don't, give me a few eggs, you know, a barter system, which was great. And yeah, the physicians didn't know a lot about, you know, the anatomy. So like, oh, I don't know what to do, I'll just bleed you for a bit. And if you've got a fever, or, you know, it's not really good to lose blood. You know, you need that blood, you need that iron and nutrients flowing through as much as you can, not to lose it.
But you wonder in the villages, I mean, even doctors would have been rare, you know.
Yeah, they would, and they would have been extremely expensive. Like, you know, only the middle class or the higher classes would have, you know, afforded a doctor.
It's probably a really hard life. I mean, to be honest, if they say she was in her 40s, and that's kind of estimated, she would have been in her 30s or 40s, you think the life that she would have had, I mean, in terms of bedding, of heating, of all that, you know, they probably look quite old for their age, really.
Oh yeah, they would have been subjected to the elements. She would have had calluses on her hands, you know,
Yeah,
she would have had hardened skin on her feet and knees, you know, like, you know, she would, you know, no doubt she was probably a brawl woman, but, you know, it ages you. Like, if you're like, even when you see farmers today, even though they've got like equipment that they didn't have back then, they you know, the elements ages you through rain and wind and cold, you know, it does stuff to your anatomy and your skin. So she would have had cuts and bruises, calluses on her hands, hardened skin on her knees and her feet. I mean, like, if they're anything like me, I have hard skin on my feet. So, you know.
But that's witches, we're used to walking barefoot.
Hey, well, a lot of people did, you know, a lot of times people would walk barefooted because leather was quite expensive, you know. And even as a farmer, like, if your cattle died, you know, that is subjective. Not although it's your cattle, it's also your lord's cattle. So you have to, like, you know, he has to, he'll be like, well, you know, you've lost cattle, so that has to go to butchery. You know, you have to have a barter system, like what happens to skin. And a lot of times, like, your lord, you know, landlords were like, well, if you want that leather, you know, we're gonna have to up the rent this month, you know. Like, it was really hard, you know, and people were subjected to all sorts of you know, scrutiny. So
It's true. Well, I'm going to dash, but I'd say thank you so much. It's been a brilliant evening, and everybody was superb.
They
Really.
were. And like I said, I give my rose to all of you. And yes, thank you as well. We will have another chat soon.
Oh, definitely.
I love, basically, check out her music. If you're a fan of Courtney Love, like I am, and grunge, listen to her music. I loved it. It's Isobel with Courtney Love grunge. I love it.
We are a band called Husbands and Knives, and we've got an album called Virosa Ebriosa, which means drunken slut in Latin. And the songs are mainly inspired by witches, the goddess Babylon, and obviously Isobel Gowdie, plus a few stupid drunk punk songs as well.
Why? You have to.
Exactly.
Spirit of rock. I thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Speak later.
And like I said, thank you all that has participated in this, that has bought a ticket, that are to the performers. To the performers, I offer my rose to you. Traditionally, you would throw roses. I can't because it's Zoom, but my rose goes out to you. And for the performers, I have a few wee handmade things that I want to gift to you as a thank you. So I'll be contacting all the performers soon in regards to them gifts. And yeah, support our cause. And we raised £300 from this event, which will go towards the funding of the documentary for Isobel Gowdie. Yet to bring her story to life and give her the justice that she didn't have in life. And thank you all. Blessings to you all. So someone just pointed out to me that I didn't do my poem about Isobel Gowdie that I put in my book. So I'm going to do it now. The wisdom Michael Kaelin, her spell she cast an old holiness name. Isobel Gowdie was she, and Aldine was a him. All a bit a farmer's wifey, but a canny woman was she tae. Her fair charms didn't just call the deal, but the saints and the fae. Lang did she walk her sorcery, and her charms and her magic verses. Fame door around, fae her cures and her curses. Many wish she feared nor respected, fae her power did she persist. Damned was her fate, fae she devil's work she confessed. Of nichely freighting from Uldan to Dooney Hills, she strode, in shape of cat, craw, and hare, with devil at her side. Aye, she did with sorrow such a mickle care in the devil's name, and with Elshot, charm Becky, Dolly, many did she lame. But not always was she wicked, nor worked such devilish harms. For fae she hilt the sick, fae the witches' charms. She hilt bands from fae bewitchment, and she wakened fevers, fae dishning mitch her down feet. Fae folks was her deceivers. With her title suits thee, a witch, ways woman, or charmer. She was nae just a wee farmer, wifey of a farmer. She stood out fae the rest the witches accused, but was nae set from those kilt nor abused. Say with title suits thee, fae she was a fine woman indeed. Her spirit ought to be honoured, with dance, song, and hallowed creed. Huss and Hugut, Huttock, doth shout, and fae her enemies did she flee, for she was a mickle wise woman, and her name is Isobel Gowdie. So I'm not much of a singer, although it does run in my family. I thought I'd like to sing this song, which is quite close to my heart. It's a Scottish song about a witch called Alison Cross, and it is sung by a band, which is one of my favourite bands, Malinky. And here it is, Alison Cross. Alison Cross lives in yonder, the ugliest witch in the north country. She's tasted me and day to our bower, the money she costed she gave to me. She took me band all of so scarlet, we rocked it down a pinches fine. Within you be my demon, say true, it's goodly gift that shall be thine. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree. Stole me a sock of the selfish silk, he rocks he gowns around the ground. And you'll be my demon, say true, this goodly gift that I'll command. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree. Told me a cup of a surly count, he roughly turned say by Jim fine. I said, my be my demon, say true, a surly gift that shall be thine. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree. She striked up her spring horn, she blew it 3 times out and shall. I'm told by the moon and the stars above, she had me rule the day I ever was born. She straight up her silvery wand, she struck it 3 times on her knee. She said words as the senses fell, I rigged in senseless to the ground. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree. Upon last Halloween, and the scary god came riding by. She turned the on the silvery conch, baby, the tree that I did lie. She slid up her silvery wand, she stripped it 3 times on her knee. She put me back to my proper shape, I laid in tatter around the tree. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree. Oh ah, ye ugly witch of Pharaoh, and let me be before I kiss your ugly mouth. I rave a tatter around the tree.